I remember the first time I walked that path alone. The fog had settled low, curling around the gnarled trunks like pale fingers, and the moon was just a sliver in the sky, barely enough to light the way. Each step I took pressed into the damp earth, a soft squelch swallowed by the heavy silence. I thought I was alone, but then there was the hum, low, almost imperceptible, like distant machinery vibrating beneath the soil. I paused. A flicker of movement in the corner of my vision made me turn, though I saw nothing. Just shadows stretching long across the trail, bending unnaturally in the pale light. My breath felt louder than it should have, each exhale curling around me in the stillness, and the trees seemed to lean closer, watching. That's when I heard the rustling, not from the underbrush, but from somewhere taller than a man should be, moving just beyond the reach of the fog. My heart slowed in confusion and fear. I wanted to leave, but my legs refused. I had to know what it was. That's when I saw it. It was late. The kind of late where even the crickets grow tired of themselves. The trail behind the cabin was almost invisible now, narrow, damp, swallowed by ferns and fog. I shouldn't have walked it that night. But the moon was so pale, so still, that it felt like the forest had paused just for me. Each step pressed water from the soil. Soft, cold. A faint hum in my ears followed the rhythm of my breathing. The air smelled of pine sap and something older. Like wet stone, like the inside of a forgotten well, I thought I was alone. But then my steps began to echo. Not right away, not sharply, just a faint mimic half a second late. Step, then another, mine. Then, not mine, I stopped. The echo didn't. A second step landed somewhere behind me, soft, measured, like someone afraid to be heard, and failing. The trees leaned close on both sides, their trunks glistening with dew, their bark almost breathing in the fog. I turned around. Nothing, just the thin white air curling over the path I had come from, swallowing it whole. For a while, I told myself it was my imagination, that maybe the forest was just repeating my rhythm the way wind repeats a whisper, but then it adjusted. When I slowed, it slowed. When I stopped, it stopped. There's a silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels aware, like something listening too closely. The fog pressed tighter. The light dimmed, even though the moon was still full. Every branch seemed heavier, dripping, trembling at the edges. I felt watched, but not from one place. Everywhere. A shiver crawled over my neck like static before a storm. I turned again, and that's when I saw it. Just a flicker. A darker patch within the dark. Human-shaped, but thinner than it should have been. Almost folded wrong. It stood between two birches, head tilted slightly as if curious. Then the fog breathed, and it vanished. The space it left behind seemed too empty, like it had taken something with it. I waited, listening. My pulse was the only sound that moved. The air thickened until it hurt to breathe. My mouth tasted of iron and rain. Every instinct told me to turn back, but my legs wouldn't listen, so I walked, slow, careful, eyes wide enough to sting. The forest didn't move anymore. No insects, no night birds, just the low hum of nothing. Then came the rhythm again, closer, 2 steps behind. Always 2. My throat tightened. I could feel it now, that presence, not touching me, but tracing the space where my shadow should have been. I wanted to speak, to ask who was there, but my voice didn't rise past a breath, and that's when I heard it. Not footsteps, not breathing, a whisper, low enough to slip through the fog and find the hollow of my ear. It said a name, a single name, soft, slow, like someone remembering a dream, but it wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone I knew, still. Something in the way it was spoken made my chest tighten, as if I should have known it once. As if it belonged to a version of me I had forgotten. The trees began to thin. The air turned colder. Each step felt lighter but wrong, like walking through someone else's memory. I could see the end of the trail ahead, a faint silver clearing, moonlight spilling through it like mist over glass. I didn't look back. I couldn't. because I could feel the space behind me shift. Closer, almost touching my shoulder now. But never quite. The whisper came again, this time from inside my thoughts. The same name, fainter, like it was being erased as it was spoken. And then, silence, no footsteps, no echo, no breath but mine. I stepped into the clearing and everything went still. The fog stopped moving. The air lost its sound. Even the moon seemed to fade, like it didn't want to see anymore. When I finally looked down, I noticed it. A second set of footprints beside mine, wet, fresh, pointing the other way, as if something had walked me here, then turned back alone. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence breathe, and just before it ended, just before the fog began to lift, the whisper came one last time. Closer than ever, right behind my ear. That same name, and even now. I can't stop wondering if it was calling for me or through me. It was colder that night. The kind of cold that clings to skin, not from the air, but from something deeper. The forest hollow always looked different after dusk. The trees leaned closer, their branches stitched together like ribs closing over a wound. I followed the same narrow path, boots sinking softly into wet leaves. Each breath came out pale, floating for a moment before fading into the mist. The silence felt heavy. Too clean. Too complete. Even my own heartbeat sounded wrong inside it. That's when I saw it. A faint shimmer. Deep between the trees. A flicker. Small. Almost shy. At first I thought it was a reflection. Maybe moonlight caught on something glass. But the moon was hidden, and the air was thick with fog. Nothing should have been able to shine. Still, there it was, pale and pulsing like it was breathing. I felt it before I realized it. The pull. Something inside me leaned toward it. Not my body, but the quiet part of my mind that recognizes danger and mistakes it for curiosity. The more I watched, the closer it seemed. Like the fog was folding the distance between us. Each flicker came slower, deeper. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, almost calling. The forest shifted around me as I walked. The ground softened. The smell changed. Wet bark, then moss, then something metallic beneath the damp. Every few steps, the light disappeared behind the fog, then came back again, always a little farther ahead. I told myself I'd stop when I reached the hollow, just to see what it was, but the trail had vanished, and I was walking on silence. The fog brushed against my arms like cool fabric. Every branch I passed seemed to hum with something beneath the surface, a vibration too low to hear, but too real to ignore. Then I reached it, a clearing, perfectly round, bathed in a color I can't describe. Not white, not silver, something between the two. Too still to be light, too alive to be shadow. The flicker hovered near the ground, trembling. It felt like it was deciding. I stepped closer. My pulse matched its rhythm. Every flicker, a beat. Every beat, a whisper behind my ribs. And then it stopped. The light didn't fade. It snapped out. Like it had been swallowed. The clearing fell into a deeper dark than before. For a moment I thought my eyes had closed. But they hadn't. The world had. I stood there, listening, waiting. But the hum that filled the forest had gone silent too. Even my breathing sounded wrong. Muffled, like it didn't belong here. The trees around the clearing looked different now, taller, closer. Their shapes bent slightly, as if leaning in to see what I'd do next. And in that silence, the air began to throb again. A slow, pulsing quiet that filled my chest and pressed against my skull. It wasn't a sound. It was a presence. Something in the fog shifted. Shadows crossed where the light had been, changing direction, though there was nothing to cast them. I could feel my heartbeat trying to match their rhythm again. The urge to move came too late. My feet were already taking a step back. Then another. The fog followed. Or maybe it wasn't fog anymore. It moved differently. Heavier, with weight. I whispered something. I don't even remember what. A name, maybe, or a plea. No echo came back. Only the faintest trace of warmth, brushing my ear as if something unseen had leaned close. The hum returned, but softer now, gentle, almost kind. I turned away, finally finding the faint line of the path again. My steps felt too loud, like I was walking through someone else's silence. The flicker never came back. Not once, but as I reached the edge of the hollow, I looked behind me and saw it again, just for a heartbeat, far back in the fog, still, watching. Only this time, it didn't shine. It mirrored. A faint, pale reflection of my own face, floating in the dark, and when I blinked, it was gone. I walked home without a sound. The hum followed for a while, then stopped. But even now, when the night gets still enough and the air turns cold again, I swear I can feel that pull return. Faint. Waiting. Somewhere deep in the fog, something flickers, and I almost want to follow. The forest looked different beneath the pines. Taller, darker. The air was thin and sharp, as if the night itself was holding its breath. I remember how the moonlight tried to slip through. Thin, silver beams cutting through layers of branches, but never touching the ground. Everything below stayed in shadow. Even me. The needles beneath my feet were soft, wet, and strangely warm in places. The scent of sap filled my lungs. Sweet at first, then bitter, like something that had been left too long in the dark. The forest was quiet, but not silent. There was movement. A faint rustle, like something brushing against bark just out of sight. At first I thought it was wind, the kind that weaves between trees and disappears before you can follow it. But the air wasn't moving. The branches hung still. The fog, what little there was, hung low and unmoving, like a breath frozen halfway. Then I heard it again, rustling, soft, rhythmic, almost like a whisper wearing the shape of my name. I froze. It came from behind the pines. Too close. I turned slowly, waiting for the movement, but the space behind me was just a column of trunks stacked endlessly into the dark. No wind, no leaves falling, just that slow, steady rustling that seemed to breathe in time with me. I whispered once quietly to break the silence, but my voice died before it could reach the air. The rustling stopped, and then shifted. It came from my left now, deeper, closer. I could feel it before I could hear it. A faint tremor through the soil, like something dragging itself between the roots. I took one step forward, then another. My pulse felt wrong in my throat, too heavy, too loud. The trees began to close in. Their trunks looked thicker here, their shadows more deliberate. Every step seemed to echo into a place that shouldn't have been able to echo. Then the whisper came again, this time clearer. My name, drawn out, like someone tasting it rather than speaking it. I could tell it came from above. I lifted my head. The pines towered over me, their tops lost in black. But something was moving up there, slow, against the grain of the night. At first it looked like a shadow, but shadows don't climb, and this one did. It shifted sideways along the trunk of a tree, lightless, bending at angles that didn't make sense. The branches trembled, but not from wind. It was using them, gripping. The rustling grew sharper, needles scraping, bark peeling. And then it stopped again, perfectly still. The air hummed in my ears. My breath came out too loud. I tried to see its face, but the moonlight broke apart before it could reach that high. Then, like a sudden blink, it was gone. Not climbed away. Not fallen. Just gone. The forest exhaled. A rain of pine needles drifted down slowly, spiraling through the pale beams of light. They fell around me in silence, and that's when I realized the rustling hadn't stopped. It was just moving differently now. All around. In every direction at once, 100 small movements behind every tree, shifting, watching, waiting for me to turn the wrong way. The ground beneath me trembled, not from weight, but from rhythm. Like something beneath the roots was breathing. The branches overhead began to creak, low and long, and I swear they leaned toward me. I backed away slowly. Each step made the forest react. A soft stir, a ripple through the pine needles, as if it was learning how to move with me. When I finally looked up again, I saw it. That same shadow, only now it was on the wrong side of gravity, hanging upside down from a branch that didn't sway. Arms spread wide, head tilted too far. It stayed there, completely still as I stared. No eyes, no mouth, just the outline, dark against darker, like something that shouldn't exist had been drawn into the air. And when I took one more step forward, it moved, not toward me, but into the trunk. It slipped inside as if the bark opened for it and then closed again. Only the smallest tremor of needles marked the place it had been. The forest waited. I waited with it, then nothing, just that faint hum in the still air, a silence so deep it pressed against my skin. I left the pines behind me, one step at a time, careful not to make a sound, but even now, when the wind moves through trees or the night grows too still, I swear I can hear it again. That soft rustling, that whisper. The forest breathing my name. The path narrowed the deeper I went. The trees grew taller, their branches bending low, weaving together until the sky disappeared. It was late. The kind of late that feels endless, where every breath hangs heavy and every step feels borrowed. Fog gathered under the canopy, rolling slow, curling around my ankles like breath. The world above was gone. Only the pale gray beneath the branches remained. A light that didn't come from the moon, or from anything I could name. The air was still, thick with the smell of wet bark and something faintly metallic, like rust left in the rain. I tried to follow the path, but it was fading. The ground blended into itself, and every direction looked the same. I should have turned back. But something quiet pulled me forward. Not a voice. Not even a feeling, just a knowing. The fog shimmered ahead, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement, shapes. Tall, pale forms standing between the trees. At first they looked like trunks, warped by the mist, but they weren't still. They leaned, tilted, breathing just enough to be alive. The air began to hum, low, steady, like the ground itself had a pulse. Every inch of me wanted to stop, but my feet kept going, as if they were no longer mine. The pale shapes stayed distant, but their edges flickered, like light caught in water. I blinked once. They vanished. The fog folded in, thicker now, damp against my skin. That's when I saw it. Between two dark pines, something stood, taller than the trees around it. Thin, impossibly thin. Its outline wrong, as if stretched in places a body shouldn't stretch. It didn't move, didn't step forward. It just was. Even from far away, I could feel it watching, not with eyes, but with presence. Every time I looked directly at it, my vision wavered. Like the fog between us thickened to keep me from seeing too much. I took a step closer. Then another. My breath came shallow. The air felt colder now, as if every inhale pulled the warmth out of me. I wanted to speak, to ask what it was. But the words died before they formed. Something in me knew it didn't want sound. It wanted silence. The hum grew louder. Not in my ears, but inside my chest. A steady vibration that rattled through my ribs. The pale figure shifted slightly, as if acknowledging the movement. And then it leaned. Not forward. Not back, sideways, against gravity. The motion was slow. Measured, like a gesture. And though it never took a step, the space between us grew smaller. The fog reacted to it. Rippling, bending like it was being pushed aside by invisible hands. I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to. But another part, quieter, calmer, wanted to see what would happen if I didn't. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe the forest had been waiting for that. The hum broke suddenly, splintering into static. the air filled with a faint crackle, like electricity under wet skin. I blinked again, and the figure was gone. Only the fog remained, thicker, paler, and somehow emptier than before, but I could feel it. Still here, just outside the edges of sight, watching. The trees looked taller now, their bark lighter. Every shadow carried movement that wasn't mine. The hum faded, but something else replaced it. A deep, quiet silence that pressed against my skull. It wasn't peace. It was waiting. I turned slowly, trying to find the path again. The ground beneath my feet looked the same in every direction, but somehow my steps still carried me forward. The canopy above shifted. Its pale underside flickered like light behind skin, and for a brief moment I saw them again. Those shapes in the fog. Still. Facing me. Dozens now, each one faint, almost transparent, as if made of air and moonlight. They didn't move closer. They didn't have to. I could feel their attention like warmth against the cold. A pull that wasn't unkind, but wasn't human either. I stood there until the air stopped trembling, until the forest remembered how to breathe again. When I finally stepped back, the fog receded and the canopy thinned. A sliver of real moonlight cut through the branches and touched my hands. The figures melted with it, slowly, like ice into water. And then, nothing, just trees, just silence. But as I left that place, the hum returned. So faint it could have been my pulse, and in the far distance, beneath the pale canopy, something tall was still standing. Night came quietly that evening. The sky dimmed to a color I couldn't name. Not black, not blue, but something hollow between the two. The air was still. The kind of stillness that makes sound feel louder than it should. I had been sitting near the window, watching the fog roll across the ground, when I first heard it. A low hum. Barely there. Almost human, but too steady. Too perfect to belong to a person. It wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't inside either. It was just around. Like the air had learned how to vibrate, I held my breath, listening. The hum pulsed once, then again, in rhythm with my heartbeat. And then beneath it came something softer, whispers. So faint I thought they were just my own thoughts echoing back. But they weren't. They were different. Almost delayed, a half-second late. Repeating. Fragments of what I was thinking, spoken in a voice that wasn't mine. I stood up. The floorboards gave a slow groan beneath my feet. The air grew colder with each step I took. The whispering followed, not loud, never loud, but close. Like breath against the back of my neck. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved again, it returned. Each word felt unfinished, like it was trying to remember how to speak. I whispered something under my breath just to test it. A small thought, barely formed. I shouldn't be hearing this. And in the silence that followed, I heard it, that same sentence, repeated softly, broken apart and spoken back to me. Each word came slower, dragged out. I shouldn't be hearing this. My chest tightened. It didn't feel malicious, just curious. Like something unfamiliar was trying to understand what I was. The hum deepened, low enough that I could feel it in my ribs. The air seemed to move with it, a subtle wave that brushed past my skin and made the hairs on my arms rise. I looked toward the window again. The fog had thickened outside, curling upward, pressing faintly against the glass. Something was standing in it. At first, I thought it was a trick of light, a shape, pale, long, barely visible beneath the layers of mist. It wasn't moving. It was waiting. I don't remember deciding to open the door, but somehow I was already standing at the threshold. The air outside was colder, sharp enough to sting when I breathed. Every sound felt distant. The hum was still there, somewhere above the trees. I stepped forward. The fog moved with me, not away. With. The shape ahead didn't shift or turn. It simply existed in the white air, like it had always been there, and I was only now able to notice it. As I got closer, the whispers returned. This time, they weren't just repeating me. They were searching, threading through my thoughts, picking out words before I could think them. The figure tilted slightly. Not human, not animal. Just wrong. It shimmered faintly, as if it was made from the same fog that surrounded it. I took one more step. And that's when it dissolved. Not vanished. Dissolved. Like mist meeting light. 1 second it was there, the next it was nothing. A sudden wave of cold hit me, deep, clean, like stepping into water. My breath came out in clouds. The whispers stopped. The hum, too. Everything went perfectly still. Even the fog seemed to freeze in place. Then from behind me, a faint sigh. So soft it almost wasn't there. I turned fast, but there was only fog. Only the pale shape of trees fading into gray. I stood there for a long time, waiting for the sound to return. It didn't. The silence had weight now, as if the world was holding something in. When I finally stepped back inside, the air was warm again. The window no longer showed fog, just darkness, flat and endless. I sat down, trying to steady my breathing, but when I closed my eyes, I heard it again, that same hum, faint, far away, and just beneath it, the whisper of my own voice, repeating a thought I hadn't said out loud. It knows I heard it. The hum faded. The silence stretched, and somewhere in that stillness, just before I drifted into uneasy sleep, the whisper came one last time, right beside my ear, not repeating me anymore. Just answering, I know. It was early evening when I found it. The air was cool, and the forest felt older than it had that morning. I'd been following a narrow path, one that looked like it hadn't been walked in years. The light came thin through the canopy, breaking apart into small, dusty beams. The trees leaned close together here, their roots twisting over one another like veins. And then I saw it. The hollow tree. It was taller than the others, its trunk wide enough to swallow a small room. The bark was pale and split down the middle as though something had once clawed its way out. I stopped a few steps away. The air around it felt strange, thicker somehow. Each breath carried a damp, earthy scent, like rotting leaves mixed with rain. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then I heard it, a low, steady inhale, followed by a slow, soft exhale. The tree was breathing. I froze. The rhythm was faint, almost like the pulse of the wind, but not quite. It was too even, too alive. With every inhale, the bark seemed to tighten, and when it exhaled, the hollow darkened, as if something inside had shifted. I stepped closer. The light dimmed. Even the birds had gone silent. I could see inside now. The hollow space was deep, spiraling upward into darkness. Something moved in there. A flicker, quick, sharp, like the twitch of a shadow when you blink. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light. But then another flicker came. And another. Each one seemed closer to the edge. The air pressed colder against my skin. I could hear faint rustling from within, a slow brushing sound like dry leaves turning themselves over. I whispered to no one. "Is someone there?" The words disappeared, swallowed by the hollow. I leaned in. My hand rested on the bark. It was warm, faintly pulsing under my palm like the beat of something sleeping. Inside, the shadows moved again. They didn't have shape, just movement, a restless stirring. I took one more step forward, close enough that I could feel my breath bouncing off the inner walls. Empty, completely empty, no movement. No creature. Nothing but dark air and a faint hum that made the back of my neck tighten. And yet, something brushed past me. Cold, soft, barely there, but enough to send a shiver through my spine. I turned, but there was no one behind me. Only fog gathering low to the ground, curling around my shoes. The hollow seemed deeper now, darker. I could feel it watching, even though it had no eyes. The breathing began again. Slow, drawn out. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't me. The sound filled the clearing, pressing against my ears, my chest, until I could feel my own breath sinking to it. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. exhale. I tried to pull away, but my hand stayed against the bark. It was as if the tree had grown around it, gently holding me there. A warmth spread through my fingers. Then, a pulse, once, twice, something alive beneath the surface. I yanked my hand back. The bark left a faint mark on my skin, almost like the imprint of veins. The air shifted again. The flickers inside grew frantic. They darted from one side to the other like trapped moths searching for a way out. And just for a second, I saw it. A shape. Not fully formed, not fully gone, rising from the darkness inside the trunk. Tall, colorless, as though it had been part of the tree all along. It leaned forward, not moving its legs, just bending until its face, if it had one, was inches from mine. The air between us trembled, then it was gone. The flickers stopped. The breathing ceased. Only silence remained. The forest seemed to exhale all at once. Leaves shifted. The fog began to thin. I stepped back slowly, my pulse still racing in my hands. The tree was still again. Just a hollow shell, empty and harmless, but when the wind moved through it, it carried something faint. A whisper, low, broken, and familiar. It wasn't words exactly, more like a memory trying to speak. I turned away, but before I left the clearing, I glanced back once more. The hollow looked smaller now, closed, almost sealed. But I swear, as the last bit of light faded through the branches, I saw the bark rise and fall again, inhale, exhale, as though the forest itself was breathing, quietly waiting for me to return. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the insects had stopped their song. The air hung still, heavy with mist that brushed my cheeks as I walked. The path beneath me was narrow. Soft earth, damp leaves. Every step sank slightly, and the ground gave a muted sigh beneath my shoes. It was late. I could barely see the line where the trees ended and the fog began. Each pine stood tall and unmoving. Their shadows stretched thin across the path. It felt like walking through a memory, one I wasn't supposed to remember. For a while, the only rhythm was mine. My breath, my steps. The faint hum of blood in my ears. Then, a second rhythm joined, another set of footsteps. Slow, measured, matching mine perfectly. I stopped. The echo stopped, too. The silence pressed close, thick and waiting. I looked over my shoulder, nothing. Only fog, curling gently between the trees. I turned back, took a step forward. Another step followed. I froze. The echo came from behind me, a perfect mirror. Heel to toe, light, careful. I swallowed hard. My pulse climbed into my throat. It couldn't be the wind. It couldn't be the forest shifting. It was too deliberate. I tried again, 2 quick steps forward. 2 echoed behind me, the same weight. The same pace, I whispered so softly I wasn't sure if the words even left my mouth. Who's there? Nothing answered. Only the faint hiss of the mist sliding between branches. I turned around slowly. The air felt colder in that direction, as if the fog itself breathed against my skin. Shapes floated at the edge of sight. Branches, shadows, maybe more. I squinted into the pale, colorless haze. A faint outline stood among the trees, tall, still, barely there. It wasn't moving, but the fog around it seemed to pulse, shifting as though it inhaled. I blinked once, and it was gone. The emptiness, where it had been felt louder than sound. A hollow space, ringing inside my chest. The footsteps began again. Closer this time, I started walking faster, not running, just trying to keep control of my breathing. Each step I took, another followed. Always one behind, always exact. My hands were cold, my palms damp against my sides. Every sense sharpened until the world narrowed to rhythm, mine and the one behind me. The trees seemed to lean in, listening. Their needles trembled with the faintest movement, like a sigh they couldn't release. I reached a small clearing. Moonlight spilled weakly through the fog, glowing silver against the ground. I stopped again. The footsteps stopped. I turned slowly, eyes searching the mist. For a long moment there was nothing, only silence so deep it felt alive. Then, in the softest patch of fog, something moved, not walking. Not running, just shifting. As if the mist itself was trying to take shape. I stepped closer, the air turning colder with each breath. The outline sharpened, long, thin, almost human, but stretched too tall, too still. It leaned slightly forward as though it were studying me. I couldn't move. My body knew before my mind did that it wasn't supposed to be seen. A faint hum rose around me, low, uneven. It filled my ears, my head, like the forest had started to vibrate. Then the figure dissolved, melted into fog, leaving only pale ripples in the air where it had been. The echo stopped. Everything stopped. I was alone again. The silence after it left felt heavier than before. Every rustle of my jacket sounded too loud, every breath too harsh. I looked down at the ground, half expecting to see prints beside my own. There were none. Only the faint marks of my shoes in the damp earth, trailing backward into the fog. But as I watched, one print deepened, just slightly, as if something unseen had stepped into it, pressing down, matching it. The air trembled once more, then stilled. I turned and walked on. This time I didn't look back. I could feel it, though. A presence, light and patient, following somewhere behind. Every few steps I thought I heard it again. The faintest echo. Soft. Precise. When I finally reached the edge of the trees, the forest felt like it exhaled behind me. The mist thinned. The hum faded. But even now, when I walk alone at night, I catch it sometimes. That perfect rhythm falling into step with mine, never ahead, never behind. Just close enough to remind me that something still remembers the path I took that night. It was colder that evening. The air felt thin, as if the forest had stopped breathing. A slow mist moved between the trees, curling low, pale as milk. Each step I took pressed into the damp ground, soft, soundless, absorbed by moss and rot. The path was fading. It always did when the fog grew thick. That's when I saw it. A branch, low and bent, curving downward in an impossible shape. Not broken, not fallen, bent, as though something had pressed its full weight on it, forcing it to bow toward the earth. It pointed directly to the right, toward a path I hadn't noticed before, narrow, choked with roots and wet leaves. For a moment I stood still, watching how the mist seemed to drift along that direction, like smoke being pulled by something unseen. My chest felt heavy, but my curiosity was louder than my fear. I stepped toward it. The air shifted the moment I crossed beneath the branch, colder, damp against my skin. Each breath tasted faintly metallic, like rain and rust. The forest behind me dimmed, as if the light itself hesitated to follow. I walked deeper. The path narrowed until it felt like it was pressing in on both sides. Thin trees leaned toward me, their bark slick with moisture, their branches dripping slow, steady drops. Each drip fell with a tiny click against the leaves below. Steady, rhythmic, like a clock buried in the dirt. Then the silence deepened. No birds, no wind, only my footsteps. And even they began to sound strange, too sharp, too close. Each one echoed faintly in the fog, as if someone walked beside me just out of sight. I tried to breathe slower, to steady the rhythm. The forest seemed to listen. My heart was beating loud enough to hear in my ears. Every thump felt like it belonged to someone else, something echoing back inside my chest. A soft rustle came from the trees to my left, then another. Not animal movement, too careful. I turned. The mist thickened instantly, wrapping around the shape before I could see it. Only faint outlines remained. A curve, a shoulder, maybe a head. It was gone the next second. I took a step back, but the ground behind me felt softer, like I'd stepped on something hollow beneath the earth. The air around me trembled faintly, like a breath against my ear. That's when I noticed The bent branch wasn't just behind me anymore. Another one stood ahead. Twisted, arched, pointing deeper still. I followed without thinking. I don't know why. It felt like moving through a dream, the kind that doesn't let you wake until it's done. The fog moved in waves now, rolling low over the ground, touching my ankles like cold fingers. The trees above swayed, though there was no wind, their leaves whispering quietly to one another. I could smell something faintly sweet, decaying bark, wet earth, and something else beneath it. Like breath. The path opened suddenly into a hollow. Small, circular, covered in fog so dense I could barely see my own feet. In the center, the ground dipped slightly. A dark patch where the soil looked disturbed. I stepped closer, kneeling without meaning to. The dirt was soft, freshly turned. There was no sound now. No dripping, no wind. Even my breathing felt wrong, like it was being swallowed by the mist. I pressed my hand against the ground. It was warm, faintly pulsing. Something moved beneath it. I stumbled back, heart racing, eyes searching the fog for movement. Everything looked the same, white, shifting, endless. Then from somewhere close, a quiet crack, wood bending. I turned and saw another branch, curling down slowly, like it was bowing again, pointing back the way I came. For a moment, I thought I saw something standing beside it, a tall, thin outline, motionless in the mist. But when I blinked, the space was empty. The fog began to move again, retreating, carrying its secrets with it. I followed the bent branch back through the narrowing path, my breath shallow, my heartbeat steady but distant, like it belonged to the forest now. When I finally stepped beneath the first branch, the one that had started it all, the air lightened. The normal forest sounds returned. Crickets, wind, faint rustling leaves, but the path it had pointed to was gone. Only unbroken trees and soft moss remained. Still, sometimes, when I walk near that part of the woods, I see another branch, curving low, straining under some invisible weight, always pointing somewhere darker, always waiting. The night was clear, still, the kind of silence that feels too full, like something is waiting to be heard. I followed the faint trickle of water through the trees, the smell of wet earth and pine thick in the air. A narrow stream ran between the roots, thin as a vein, reflecting what little moonlight made it through the branches. The fog had settled low, hugging the ground, curling around the edges of my shoes. Each step was soft, muted by damp leaves. The forest around me felt frozen in place. No rustle, no wings, no whisper of wind, only the faint glimmer of the stream. I crouched near the edge. The water moved lazily, barely enough to make a sound. It shimmered like liquid glass, broken only by thin ripples sliding past the stones. That's when I saw it. A shape in the reflection. Tall. Still standing across the stream, its outline was sharp against the pale light. Perfectly human in shape, but the space behind it was empty. I looked up. No one stood there. Only the opposite bank, lined with ferns and tangled roots, glistening under the moon. But when I looked back down, the figure was still there, motionless in the reflection, watching me from a place that didn't exist. My throat tightened. The surface of the water quivered slightly, distorting the image, stretching the shadow until it bent across the stream and reached toward my side. I took a slow step back. The shadow followed. Not in the reflection this time. Beneath it, something dark moved under the surface, rolling like smoke through water. It trailed just beneath the light, curling, shifting, splitting into several smaller shapes that drifted like ink bleeding through paper. I knelt closer, unable to look away. The shadows moved faster. They wove between the stones, darting around each other like they were alive. One passed beneath my reflection. For a second, it looked like it paused there, as if it were staring back. The surface rippled. My face blurred, and the darkness below twisted into the faint suggestion of hands, thin and reaching. Pressing upward against the water's skin, I stumbled back onto the damp earth. The stream looked normal again, calm, untouched. but my heart wouldn't settle. Every breath felt shallow, like I was inhaling through cold cloth. I tried to listen for something, anything, but the world had gone heavy with silence. Even the stream seemed to have stopped moving. I crouched again, just enough to see the water's surface. It was smooth now, perfectly still. Then a single ripple bloomed from the center, as if something had just dipped its finger in. Another followed. Then another, tiny circles expanding, colliding, breaking apart. From deep within, the dark began to rise again, not drifting this time, but climbing. A shape formed beneath the reflection, larger, more defined. I leaned closer without meaning to. The water's surface bent outward, like a breath from below was pushing it upward. The reflection warped. The moon stretched into a pale streak, the trees bent, and the shadow grew until it filled the stream entirely. A low hum rolled through the air. It wasn't sound exactly, more like pressure against my skin. The shape moved closer to the surface, inches away now, and though I couldn't see its face, I could feel it watching. My reflection vanished completely. Only the shadow remained. The hum deepened until it vibrated in my chest. Then, without warning, the water went black. Not dark. Black, as if the light had been pulled out of it, swallowed whole. I stepped back, tripping over a root, my hands sinking into the cold mud. The instant I broke eye contact, the sound stopped. The stream was clear again. Moonlight danced over its surface as if nothing had changed. But the reflection was wrong. There was no figure now, only the trees, the water, and my own face, except my reflection didn't move when I did. I stared at it, heart hammering, waiting for it to catch up. It didn't. It just stood there, slightly off, head tilted, eyes fixed downward, as if it were watching something else below. Then, slowly, the water began to ripple again, distorting both of us. The shadow underneath stirred once more. It drifted just beneath my reflection, coiling gently, like it was waiting for the surface to break. I turned away, walked quickly back into the fog. Behind me, the stream returned to its quiet rhythm. Soft trickles, steady hum, but I could still feel it. That faint pull from the water, like a gaze pressed against my back. And when I passed another stream days later under the same pale light, I couldn't bring myself to look down, because I knew, if I did, something else might be looking back. The forest dipped into a hollow, a soft bowl of earth, wrapped in mist. The air there felt thicker, like it had been waiting too long. The kind of quiet that made every step feel like a disturbance. I moved slowly, my breath shallow against the cold. The trees leaned closer here, their trunks warped, their roots curling from the ground like frozen veins. Everything smelled damp. Moss, rot, the faint sweetness of rain-soaked leaves. Fog drifted low, clinging to my knees as I walked deeper. It muffled everything, my footsteps, the hum of distant crickets, even my heartbeat. That's when I noticed it. A sound that didn't belong. Faint, uneven, breathing. At first, I thought it was mine, the air catching in my throat from the cold, but then it stuttered, an extra inhale, half a beat behind my own. I stopped. So did it. The forest held its breath with me. I exhaled slowly, watching the mist leave my mouth. A moment later, a second cloud bloomed ahead, just out of reach, like someone was standing there, breathing the same air. My skin prickled. Every hair rose as if the air itself had shifted. I turned, slowly. Nothing. Only fog. Only trees. But when I faced forward again, I heard it. Closer now. That same strained rhythm. Shallow. Dragging. Each inhale came with a soft tremor, as though whoever it belonged to was struggling to keep up. I could feel it echoing in my chest, a perfect imitation of my own breath, but heavier. I whispered, barely, "Hello." The breath paused, then returned, matching me again. I stepped back, and something in the mist seemed to swell. The air thickened, pressing against my face, as if the fog itself had a pulse. Shapes moved faintly inside it, not walking, just shifting, like light bending through smoke. I took another breath, this time holding it in my throat. The echo held too. Then, from somewhere in the gray ahead, a deeper inhale. Long, wet, slow, not matching anymore. This one belonged to something else. It rattled like air dragging through hollow lungs. The trees seemed to lean away from the sound. I stayed still, knees locked, hands shaking against the cold. The fog rolled closer, and through it, a shape began to form, tall, thin, its edges soft and flickering. It didn't move like a person. It swayed as if made of the same air it stood in. I couldn't see a face, just the outline and the faint shimmer where its chest rose and fell. Breathing, always breathing. It stood there for a long time, close enough that I could hear the quiet pull of air entering and leaving it. Each breath brushed against me, cold against my skin, as though the air between us had thinned. I wanted to move, to step back, to run, but every muscle had turned to stone. I blinked once and the figure faded. The fog folded in and the space where it had been was suddenly empty. No sound, no breath, just silence. A silence so deep it hurt. I waited, listening, and slowly the echo returned. Not in front of me this time, behind, the same rhythm as before, inhalation, pause, exhalation. Close enough that I could feel the air move against the back of my neck. I turned fast. There was nothing there. Just the hollow and the endless mist curling through the trees. But I could still hear it, circling, keeping time with mine. Every time I tried to steady my breath, it changed too, matching me again like a mirror just out of sight. The edges of my vision began to pulse. The cold dug deeper into my chest. I backed away until my shoulder brushed a tree. The bark was slick, coated in something wet that smelled of earth and decay. Then, a flash of movement in the fog. The outline again, towering, head tilted slightly as if listening. I held my breath. For one long, aching moment, and this time, the echo didn't stop. It kept breathing. Even when I didn't, long, dragging exhales, as if it were using my air to fill its own lungs. The fog swirled, and I thought I saw it lean closer. A hollow shape made of nothing but breath. I turned and ran. Branches whipped at my arms, roots tugged at my feet. But the breathing followed, not from behind, not from ahead, from everywhere. In, out, until the forest began to thin, and the mist lifted enough for me to see the path again. The moment I stepped out of the hollow, it stopped. The air went still. The forest exhaled once, like it had been holding something in. I stood there, shaking, waiting for it to return. It didn't. Only my own breathing filled the silence again. Ragged, uneven but mine. At least I think it was, because sometimes, when the night gets quiet enough, I can still hear it waiting beneath my breath, trying to remember how to be human. It was dusk when I found the path again. The air was cool, the sky the color of bruised lavender, and the forest had begun to hum softly, like it always did before night fell. The dirt trail wound forward between tall pines, narrow and half swallowed by roots. I'd walked this way before. I was sure of it. But the trees looked different, closer, taller. Each time I glanced back, the curve behind me seemed steeper than before, as if the ground had bent itself in the few seconds I wasn't looking. I slowed my pace. The crunch beneath my boots echoed longer than it should have. There was no wind, but the leaves whispered anyway. A soft, dry sound, like breath through paper. I told myself it was nothing. Just the forest. Just the evening settling in. Then I noticed something strange. The path curved to the left. I followed. But after a few steps, it curved again. This time, to the right. When I looked back, there was no curve at all. Only a straight, dark tunnel cut through the trees. My throat felt tight. The air had grown heavier, as if the forest was folding in on itself, closing behind me. I took a slow breath, trying not to think about how wrong it felt. The trees didn't look still anymore. Their trunks leaned slightly, angled inward, and the branches above twisted like reaching arms. I kept walking. One careful step, then another. The dirt underfoot had softened, more like ash than soil. It left no footprints. Somewhere behind me, a dry crack, wood bending. Then another, and another, like something shifting its weight in rhythm with my steps. I turned around quickly. The path looked the same, but the shadows didn't. They stretched longer across the ground, all pointing toward me, even though the light, what little there was, came from the other direction. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I blinked, and the shapes on the ground twitched. Not with movement, but with intent. The nearest tree had split near its base, and the crack looked almost like a mouth. I backed away, and that's when I saw it. A faint glow ahead, white and cold, hovering between the trunks. It wasn't like firelight. It didn't flicker. It pulsed, steady, patient, as if waiting for me. Something in me believed I was supposed to follow it, so I did. Each step made the light grow brighter, but the trees around it blurred into shapes I couldn't hold still in my mind, like they were rearranging, moving quietly between blinks. I glanced down once and the path was gone. Only a stretch of gray soil beneath my feet, no footprints leading in or out. The light pulled me onward anyway. It moved just far enough that I could never quite reach it. A low hum filled the hollow. At first I thought it came from the trees, but when I stopped walking it didn't stop. It was coming from me, from the air in my chest, vibrating softly with each breath. The pale glow began to shift, spreading wider, as though the fog itself had started to shine, and within that light, something moved. Not a figure, not fully. Just the suggestion of one, tall, still, faded at the edges, like it had been erased too many times and was trying to redraw itself. I whispered. A small sound, barely breaking the stillness. It tilted its head. My feet sank slightly into the soft ground. The trees behind me groaned, their shapes bending again, closing tighter. The light trembled, then began to retreat deeper into the forest. Without thinking, I followed. The hum grew louder, rising through my ribs, making it hard to tell if it came from inside or around me, and suddenly, the path bent again. Sharp, too sharp. I stumbled, catching myself against a tree. Its bark was slick and cold, like skin left too long in water. When I looked up, the pale light was gone. Only the dark remained. And the trees, all of them, angled toward me, their shadows pooling like spilled ink. I spun in place. Every direction looked the same. Every path led into itself. The forest had shifted again, or maybe I had. I started to walk, slowly, carefully, hoping for an edge, a break, anything that felt like escape. But the path kept turning, curling back to where I had started. The light never returned, only the faint echo of my own breathing and the distant hum still threading through the air. Now I walk, always forward, always turning. Sometimes when the fog lifts just enough, I think I see it again. That pale shimmer between the trees. It waits for me, guiding me somewhere I can't name. But each time I reach for it, the path changes again and I realize quietly that I've never left this place at all. The forest had gone still, the kind of stillness that presses against your skin, where even the air feels like it's holding its breath. I stood at the edge of a hollow, the ground sinking gently before me, and felt the faint vibration before I heard it. A hum. Low. Steady. Somewhere beneath the earth. Or maybe inside the fog itself. It didn't sound right. It felt right. Like a thread pulling softly at my chest, asking me to follow. I didn't want to move, but I did. Each step sank slightly into damp soil, and the trees above leaned inward, their branches forming ribs of a living thing. The hum grew heavier. I could feel it behind my eyes, thick and slow, like my heartbeat had started to echo in the wrong place. The air smelled metallic. Wet bark, cold roots, something faintly sour like stone dust. I looked around and realized the forest was deeper than I'd thought. No edges, no horizon, just fog and the faint shimmer of movement inside it. The hum changed tone, rising a little as if responding to my footsteps. I stopped walking. It didn't. The sound continued, steady, patient, almost alive. It pressed against my ribs now, a vibration that seemed to match the rhythm of my breath. Each inhale made it louder. Each exhale pulled it closer. I whispered something. A quiet question I didn't mean to speak. The air answered by shifting, a flicker in the mist ahead. A shape, tall, motionless, too dark against the pale fog. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't still either. Its edges blurred as though the air refused to hold it in focus. I took a step closer. The hum grew stronger. It filled my chest now. A low resonance that made my bones ache. The closer I got, the colder the air became. Every breath left frost against my lips, but I couldn't turn back. The figure stood at the center of the hollow, waiting. It was neither near nor far, always just beyond where my eyes could rest. I tried to blink it into shape, but the fog resisted, folding around it like water over a stone. Then the hum broke. Just once. A sharp shift, like a sigh drawn too deep, and the figure moved, not forward, but outward, its form stretching, thinning into the mist until it touched everything. The hum was everywhere now. Under the soil, in the trees, inside me. I felt it in my teeth, in the back of my throat, like something enormous breathing in the dark, matching my rhythm, but one beat late. I wanted to speak again, but the air around me pulsed, closing the space between thought and sound. The figure tilted slightly, as if listening. I took another step, and another. The ground shifted beneath me, soft and uneven, as though the hollow had begun to breathe too. I reached the center, or I think I did. The fog was thicker here, heavy enough to brush against my face, cool and damp like skin after rain. The hum peaked, so deep it almost wasn't a sound anymore, just vibration, a presence, and then it stopped. Everything went weightless. The fog, the air, even the sound of my own heartbeat, gone. I blinked hard. The figure was still there, but smaller now, fainter. It raised an arm, slow and deliberate. And for a moment I thought it was pointing at me, but it wasn't. It was pointing past me, behind. I turned. Nothing, only trees, still, silent. When I looked back, the figure had dissolved. Not vanished, dissolved. Its shape unraveling into threads of fog that drifted upward and disappeared. The hum didn't return. Only the hollow breath of the forest, quiet and wrong, like it was listening for something that had just gone missing. I waited there for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough for the fog to settle. Long enough for the silence to start humming again, faint, subtle, buried deep in the soil. When I finally turned to leave, I realized the path behind me was gone. Just trees. And a faint pulse beneath my feet like a heartbeat under earth. I walked anyway, no direction. No sound but that low vibration, curling through the roots. Sometimes when I pause to breathe, it hums with me again, low, steady, patient. And I know the hollow is still listening. Fog rolled low across the forest floor, thick enough to dull the sound of my own footsteps. The air smelled of wet pine, earth, and something faintly acrid. I noticed it first as a glow, small, flickering orange, like a campfire left to die alone in the night. I stepped closer, and the glow expanded slightly, washing over the damp moss and fallen leaves. The smell of smoke reached me, warm and dry, though I could see no flames. The hollow crackle of fire seemed to hover in the air, but every step revealed nothing. No sparks, no embers. Only fog curling around the light. I swallowed hard. The hairs on my neck bristled. The light pulsed gently, a heartbeat in the mist. Then I noticed them. Figures. Shadowed shapes lingering at the edge of the glow. They didn't move like people. They didn't breathe like people. But they were there, watching. I blinked and one had shifted slightly. Closer now. Not stepping, just existing. When I tried to look directly at it, it vanished. A trick of the fog, I told myself. But then another appeared. I stepped forward. The fog wrapped around my legs, damp and cold, and the air felt heavier, as though it were pressing me toward the light. Smoke spiraled upward from the ground, soft gray curls without origin. I reached toward it, but my hand met nothing. The figures lingered, always at the edge of my vision, their shapes softening into the fog. I felt a tug at my chest. Not from them. From the space between me and the glow, I whispered a name I used to call out at campsites. Once, long ago. The fog answered with a sigh. The shapes shivered, folding inward as though recoiling from sound. I knelt near the glow. The light felt warm against my hands, though my fingers touched only mist. The smell of smoke clung to my skin. A shadow shifted behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing. Only fog and the low rustle of leaves. When I looked back at the glow, one figure had moved closer. It leaned slightly, like it was listening, or waiting for me to do something I could not name. I stepped back, and the light dimmed slightly. The smoke curled thinner. The warmth faded. A memory rose suddenly, and the last campfire I'd sat beside. The one I had left burning too long, too empty, and walked away from. The smell, the glow, the empty seats around it, all mirrored here, in this hollow that had no name. The figures flickered. I could sense them observing me, though I could not hold their gaze. I called to them silently, my mind reaching out, but they did not respond. The fog thickened. It rolled over my feet, swallowing the glow, and the campfire seemed to shrink. The smoke lifted, but it carried no warmth, no crackle, only a silence that pressed against my ears. I took a step forward. The figures recoiled, then vanished completely. The glow wavered, then disappeared as well. I was alone. Only the faint imprint of where light had been remained in the fog, a memory of warmth and shadow that I could not touch. The forest breathed around me. Every tree seemed to bend slightly closer, leaning in to watch the place where the fire had been. I walked on. My boots sank into wet leaves. The faint smell of smoke lingered on my fingers. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The fog swallowed the hollow completely. The warmth, the glow, the shadows, all gone. Only the forest remained. Silent, endless, and watching. The forest was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes each breath sound too loud. Frost crept over the path, coating the roots and fallen leaves with a fragile white crust. I walked slowly, listening. Each step left a print in the soft frost, or at least I thought it did. The air smelled sharp, cold, like ice cracking under weight. A faint hum of the forest rose from the frozen ground, low and constant, more felt than heard. Then I noticed it. Footsteps. Soft. Measured. Not mine. They approached from behind. I froze. The frost around my own boots glinted in pale moonlight. The strange thing was, my prints were moving too, shifting slightly in the snow as if drawn forward toward the approaching steps. I bent down, tracing the trail with my fingers, cold, hard, but not mine. The shapes in the snow were mine, yet not mine at all. A rustle in the trees. The wind? No, too deliberate. Something leaned closer, and the frost around the trunks seemed to stretch toward me. I took a step back. The prints moved forward, always toward something I could not see. A soft pressure settled on my shoulders, light as snow, heavy as expectation. The footsteps behind me matched my own heartbeats. Each step a mirror, each pause a warning. I tried to call out. My voice froze in my throat. The air was too still to carry it. Then I saw them. Figures, shadowed, at the edge of the frost. Silent, watching. The fog curling around their legs like smoke. They didn't move, but the prints in the snow led straight to them. I blinked. and one figure tilted slightly, leaning as though curious. I tried to look away, but my gaze returned. Something in the frost drew me back, pulling my boots along the trail that was no longer mine. The snow underfoot crunched differently now, shallow and brittle. I realized the frost itself had thickened, creeping up the trees, covering my arms and the backs of my hands with icy whispers. Each step forward brought a new sound, a soft crack, a tap against the frozen leaves, the faint brushing of invisible branches. I felt eyes on me. Not the figures, the prints, the frost. The forest itself. I stumbled. The frost underfoot gave way slightly, and the figures shifted. Closer now, though still distant, always at the periphery of my sight. The hum rose again, a vibration under my feet. I shivered. It wasn't the cold. It was the expectation of something waiting in the hollow spaces between the trees. I looked down at the prints. They were moving faster now, sliding forward across the frost without me, leading me to the figures. I wanted to step back, to resist the pull, but my feet moved anyway. The snow whispered beneath me, soft, sharp, alive. The fog thickened, wrapping the figures in pale light. I could see edges of hands, shapes like stretched shadows, but never faces. The prints paused, and I paused. The figures tilted forward slightly, and a faint exhale of cold brushed my face, like breath from beneath the snow. I understood then. The path was not mine. The footsteps were not mine. And the frost was leading me somewhere I could not escape. I took another step. The figures remained still, but the snow underfoot whispered forward, pulling, leading. I walked. My prints followed themselves. The footsteps behind me mirrored each heartbeat, and the forest waited silent, frosted, watching. I knew I would not leave the path. Not entirely. Not tonight. Only the soft crunch of snow and the faint, deliberate hum of frost and footfalls guided me deeper into the forest. The forest had settled into a quiet so deep it felt like the trees were holding their breath. Fog lay thick across the path, soft and damp against my face, curling between trunks, coating every fallen leaf. The air smelled of wet pine, earth, and frost. Every inhalation carried a faint tang of moss. I stepped forward carefully, boots pressing softly into the softened soil. Then I saw them, eyes, colorless, glowing faintly, unblinking, floating in the fog, neither high nor low, just there, watching. I froze. The forest seemed to tilt inward, leaning closer, listening. There was intelligence in those eyes, a quiet awareness that pressed on my chest. It was not a predator. It was not cruel. It simply was, and it knew I was here. I breathed slowly. The fog moved around the eyes, thin strands curling like smoke in the wind. Every step I took made the leaves shiver softly. I blinked. The eyes remained. Patient, still, watching. A rustling whispered through the branches, the static hum of something unseen moving above. I felt it in my hair, along my spine, a subtle vibration that made the air feel alive. I tried to look away, but the gaze held me, threading into the corners of my mind, pulling me forward through frost and shadow. I took another step. The fog thickened beneath my boots, wrapping my ankles in soft chill. The eyes seemed to grow slightly, responding to the pressure of my presence. I swallowed hard. A faint scent of damp stone drifted to me, like the hollow of a cave, ancient and still. I could feel my heartbeat in the fog, each pulse echoing back in subtle waves. The forest was breathing with me, or at least it felt that way, alive, watching. Then the eyes shifted. Not in movement, but in awareness. They tilted slightly, and I sensed a quiet curiosity. I wanted to speak, but words froze in my throat. The air seemed too dense for sound. A wind shivered through the fog. Soft, almost playful. The eyes wavered, then vanished. The forest exhaled. The fog drifted in smooth, curling sheets, leaving only pale shafts of moonlight through the trees. I blinked repeatedly. The space where the eyes had been was empty now, silent. I realized I could still feel them. Not seeing, but sensing. A lingering awareness like a heartbeat against my own. The forest had not let me go. I stepped forward slowly, the soil damp underfoot. leaves whispering softly against each other. Every sense was alert, yet nothing moved. The hum of the fog lingered, a vibration through branches, roots, and soil, echoing faintly in my bones. It was neither threatening nor kind, simply present. I breathed in the mist, cold and heavy, and felt awe curl through my chest. Fear had softened into wonder. The forest, it seemed, was alive in ways I could not fully grasp. I took another step, and another. The eyes had vanished, but the memory of them stayed pressed in my mind like a mark left by the wind. I stopped, listened. The forest held its silence. I could feel every leaf, every branch, every small pulse beneath the soil. A faint whisper of wind carried through, stirring the fog in slow, curling shapes. I realized the eyes had only moved somewhere else. Still watching, still aware, I walked on slowly, boots sinking softly into damp earth, breath held, aware of everything and nothing. The forest had opened its gaze to me, and even though I could not see them anymore, I knew they remained, silent, colorless, unblinking, and I felt a strange, quiet gratitude for having been seen. The trees leaned close tonight. Fog draped across their trunks, curling around low branches, wet against my cheeks. The air smelled sharp, pine, damp earth, and frost. Each breath felt like inhaling static. I walked slowly, soft footsteps pressing into the softened ground. Then I heard it, a whistling, faint, slipping between the trees like a breeze. At first I thought it was the wind, but the notes, they mimicked me. Soft, rising, falling, like my own voice played back in fragments. I stopped, listened. The fog seemed to pulse with each note. My heart sped, breath clouding in the cold air. The whistle paused, then resumed, slightly off, stretching my name into something unfamiliar, something almost alive. A rustle overhead. A shadow slipped between the branches, just out of reach, too quick to see clearly. Yet I felt it watching. The leaves whispered against themselves, soft scratches in the night. I raised a hand. The air smelled of wet bark and winter frost. My fingertips tingled in the chill. I moved forward. The whistling followed. Each note bending like my breath, twisting, echoing back from unseen heights. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadow flitted closer, then paused in the gaps of fog and branches. I sensed its shape more than saw it, leaning, tilting, patient. A low hum accompanied the whistle now, subtle, vibrating through the damp ground. I felt it through my boots, through the soles of my feet, pressing faintly against my chest. I blinked. The shadow vanished. Yet the whistle remained, sliding through the fog like a living thing. It repeated my breaths, my pauses, even the small sighs I hadn't realized I'd made. The path beneath my boots narrowed. Frost clung to each root and stone. Every step echoed slightly, but the echo felt wrong, mimicked. Something in the forest was learning from me. I tried to focus on the fog trees, on the pale moonlight slipping between branches. The shadow had not moved. Yet I felt it stretching with me, sliding silently along the fog. A gentle brush of air against my face made me shiver. The whistling dropped a note long and deliberate, as if tasting my fear. It lingered in the hollow spaces, pressing against my ears. I stopped again. The shadow froze somewhere high, and the forest held its breath. I could smell damp needles and frost, hear the faint hum of frozen ground beneath roots. The notes twisted upward, sliding through the branches, faint and mocking. I realized I had been walking in circles, the path subtly rearranging, fog thickening with each step. A whisper of wind shook the branches. The shadow slipped down toward a low bend. Almost touchable, almost real. I held my hand out. The fog brushed my fingers. The whistling faded with the shadow, leaving only the hum of the forest. My boots sank softly in frost and earth. The path opened slightly. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and moss. Everything seemed still, but I knew it had not left. The echo of my voice lingered in the whistling that had once followed me. The shadow had only vanished from sight, folding back into the forest itself. I breathed slowly. The branches above swayed gently. Fog clung lightly to my shoulders. The forest waited, patient, softly humming in silence. I stepped forward again, alone, yet not entirely, aware of the unseen presence, and the faint echo of my own voice slipping between branches like a memory. The forest narrowed here. Two massive trees leaned toward each other, their trunks arching like silent sentinels. Fog drifted low, wrapping the hollow between them in damp, cold fingers. The air smelled of wet bark and moss, with a faint tang of decay underfoot. I stepped slowly, boots pressing into the soft earth. Then I heard it, a whisper, so faint it could have been my own breath. It carried across the hollow, sliding between the trunks. I froze. The whisper grew louder, soft consonants curling like smoke, echoing secrets I had not spoken aloud. My pulse tightened. I pressed my palms to my thighs. The fog clung to my sleeves, wet and cold, tickling my skin. The hollow seemed to deepen. Shadows thickened at the roots of the trees, stretching upward into the low fog. Another whisper drifted through. This time, a story of travelers who had vanished here, never to be found again. Each word carried a subtle weight pressing against my chest. I swallowed hard. The earth smelled faintly of frost and moss. Every leaf around me shivered as if alive. Then, my own voice. I heard a secret I had kept tightly, repeated back in that hollowed air. Not spoken aloud, yet rendered tangible by the whispers. The hairs on my neck rose. I breathed shallowly. A low hum seemed to vibrate beneath the soil, faint, steady, like a pulse of the forest itself. I wanted to step back, but my feet remained planted, rooted in the damp ground. The whispers came again, layered with other voices, all lost travelers folded into the hollow. The fog swirled, curling around my boots, around the base of the trees. Every inhale brought the smell of wet pine and frost, and a faint metallic tang that made my teeth tingle. A shadow flickered in the corner of my vision. I turned, but the hollow remained empty except for fog and twisting roots. Yet the sense of being watched pressed in from all sides. Another whisper. Closer now, breathing against my ear. It spoke fragments of memories, some mine, some not, blurring together like leaves in a stream. I tried to speak. Only a faint, breathless sound emerged. The hollow seemed to stretch, growing taller, deeper, its dark walls folding inward around the fog and the whispers. I felt my heartbeat echo in the mist, soft but amplified, like it had been captured and released by the hollow itself. Every step I shifted, the damp earth squeaking faintly beneath my boots. Then the whispering paused. Silence rolled through the hollow, thick as fog, weighty and expectant. I could smell the damp decay now, stronger, almost suffocating. The shadows at the roots seemed to move subtly, stretching toward me, yet dissolving whenever I tried to focus. A single voice remained. Mine repeated slowly, each word drawn out, folding into the fog. I stepped forward. The hollow seemed to breathe with me, its pulse syncing with mine, its whispers stretching longer, folding in unseen corners of the fog. The air pressed cold against my cheeks. Every branch above shivered softly, leaves rustling in delicate ghostly patterns. I realized I could leave. Yet a pull anchored me, not threatening, but insistent, like the forest wanted my attention. I listened. The whispers were soft now, like wind brushing across frost-tipped needles. They told stories of absence, of travelers folded into the hollow, and of secrets that lingered long after the voice had ceased. I exhaled slowly. The fog swirled around me, thick and curling, but lighter than before. I stepped away. Each boot left a soft imprint in the damp soil. The hollow stayed silent. The whispers had retreated, yet I could feel them in the mist, in the shadows, folded into the very air I breathed. I walked on, alone, carrying the hollow's secrets, quietly pressing against my mind. And though the trees towered above me and the fog clung tight, I sensed that it had not let me go entirely. The trail wound through the forest, narrow, damp, and lined with frost-tinged leaves. Moonlight filtered through skeletal branches, painting the ground in muted silver. Fog hung low, curling around the trunks like smoke. Every breath felt heavy, moist with the scent of wet earth and pine. Then I saw them, figures drifting across the trail, pale and indistinct, as if carved from the mist itself. They moved slowly, sliding over roots and rocks without sound. I stepped closer. The fog pressed against my skin, cool and damp, and the air smelled faintly of moss and decay. The first figure turned toward me. Its outline sharpened slightly, revealing the face of someone I thought I recognized. My chest tightened. A memory or a dream, but unmistakably familiar. I moved forward. The figure wavered, then dissolved into the fog. I blinked, and the trail was empty again, save for the pale light and rustling leaves. Another shape emerged. This one, too, mirrored someone I knew, their features softened by mist, but the eyes carried a hollow emptiness. The air vibrated slightly, like the subtle hum of cold wind brushing over frozen branches. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The figures continued to drift, always just ahead, always vanishing as I drew near. A shiver ran down my spine. The fog thickened, swirling around my boots and ankles, curling into the hollow of the trail. Each step forward felt slower, the ground damp and slippery underfoot. I reached out toward one figure. Its form rippled at my touch, like water disturbed by a pebble. The sense of recognition deepened, weaving dread with something else. Wonder, a feeling that I was witnessing something beyond understanding. The next figure paused. Its outline was taller this time, hands hanging loose at its sides. The fog clung to its body like a thin veil, and its gaze, if it had one, felt heavy, intelligent. A low static hummed in the air, almost like breath, almost like thought. I realized the shapes were not random. They moved with purpose, replaying fragments of lives I knew, memories etched into the mist. Some smiled faintly, others looked away, and all vanished before I could reach them. The trail narrowed further. The fog became thicker, curling into twisting tendrils that seemed to guide me. Every sound was amplified. The drip of water from a branch, the scuff of my own boots, the faint rustle of unseen wings above. A figure hovered close now. Its face was blurred, features shifting as if undecided. It leaned slightly toward me, and I felt the pull of something familiar, a memory I could not name, a presence I could not resist. I froze. The forest was silent except for the hum in the fog. The figure flickered, then dissolved completely. A cold emptiness lingered where it had been. I continued along the trail, each step careful, measured. The fog twisted and swirled, and pale shapes appeared intermittently, always familiar, always just out of reach. The forest pressed in from all sides, branches scraping lightly against each other, leaves brushing soft against my sleeves. The hum continued, low and constant, like the pulse of the forest itself. I realized the trail had changed behind me. Where I had walked, there was only fog erasing the path I had made. The figures did not follow, but their presence lingered in the cold, wet air, in the silence, in the faint memory of faces I once knew. I exhaled slowly. The trail stretched onward, empty for a moment. Then another pale shape glided into view. Its outline familiar, and I felt that same strange mix of fear and wonder curling through my chest. I walked on, each step stirring the fog, each breath carrying the scent of wet pine and cold earth. The pale shapes drifted ahead, vanishing as I approached, leaving me alone, but not entirely free. The forest was quiet, damp earth beneath my boots, fog curling low around the tree trunks. A pale light filtered through broken branches, casting long, thin shadows across the path. I noticed the first one, just as it seemed to twitch. A shadow detached from its source, sliding along the ground, its edges soft, yet deliberate. I froze. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of wet pine, and the hum of something unseen pressed against my ears. My own shadow stretched before me, then shifted, not with me. It lingered, then leaned slightly forward as if it had a mind of its own. I stepped back. The fog thickened around my ankles, damp tendrils brushing my skin. More shadows moved. From every tree, from every stone. Dark forms slinking quietly, wrapping the trail in creeping darkness. My breath came in shallow bursts. Each exhale carried the smell of frost and decay. The forest felt alive, but not in any way I knew. A shadow brushed my arm. Cold, heavier than air, like a hand pressed against bone. I turned quickly. Nothing. Only fog and more shadows gliding independently of any light. I moved forward. The ground was slick with moisture, my boots making soft splashes in hidden puddles. Every step echoed strangely. The echoes answered not by trees, but by the movement of darkness. A shadow rose from a stump, elongating toward me. It hovered, then twisted, folding into itself and stretching again. I could feel its presence around my shoulders, sliding across the fog like a cold, wet sheet. I tried to call out. My voice sounded wrong. Thin, swallowed by mist, answered only by soft, shifting forms. They moved silently, gathering along the edges of the trail. Some paused, observing. Others prowled like water, flowing and pooling wherever the light was weakest. I reached a clearing. Moonlight spilled over frozen leaves, but the shadows did not obey it. They lingered in corners, rising from their sources, stretching unnaturally, stretching toward me. The forest seemed to breathe. A low hum vibrated through the air, rustling through branches, and I realized the shadows moved with it. Each step I took, each shallow breath was mirrored by the darkness. I stopped. The fog swirled at my feet, and I could feel the shadows press closer. They were not solid, not quite touchable, but the pressure was real, like the weight of night wrapped around my chest. A shadow slid up behind me. Cold air brushed my neck. I dared not look. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the ground seemed to pulse beneath me, pulling me deeper into the trail. I turned slowly. There was nothing. Only fog, only trees, only the faint trail of my boots. But the feeling remained, that something dark had followed, that the shadows were no longer bound to the forest, that they were alive and aware. I whispered my own name. The sound hung in the mist, and one shadow responded by stretching, curling, and tilting its form as if listening. I kept walking, step by cautious step. The fog twined around my legs, shadows slipping through it like liquid smoke. Each shadow seemed to have a rhythm, matching my heartbeat, matching my breath. A gust of wind stirred the canopy. Leaves shivered above me, and the shadows flickered, breaking, then reforming, closer than before. I realized the forest was no longer neutral. It was alive with watching shapes, moving independently, swirling around me, and I could not see their beginning or end. I exhaled slowly. The fog thickened. My shadow merged with the darkness around it, and the other shadows receded slightly, though I could feel them still, coiling in the corners of my mind, pressing at my shoulders, wrapping me in silent dread. I walked on, step by careful step. The pale light ahead was faint, the shadows trailing me, always moving, always watching, and I could only follow into the endless breathing dark. The evening pressed in slowly. The forest was wet with frost, each branch dripping pale light into the gloom. A cold wind sifted through the pines, but the usual rustling of needles was gone. I stepped forward. The fog thickened around me, coiling like a living thing, and with it the world became mute. Every footfall vanished, swallowed before it could reach the trees. My breath felt loud against the silence, a rasp in a void. Even the static hum of the earth seemed to fade. Only the fog remained, dense and unmoving, and I felt suddenly alone. I reached out, brushing a hand along a tree trunk. Its bark was wet, rough against my fingers, yet I could hear nothing but the throb of my heartbeat. The forest had become hollow. The distance between sounds had dissolved. A sense of weight pressed at my shoulders. Not wind, not cold, but something solid sliding past the edge of my vision. A shape, dark, indistinct, yet present enough to brush my arm with the hint of a hand or the trace of wet cloth. I froze. The fog swallowed even my whispered thoughts. It felt almost physical, dense as water, pressing against my chest, sucking the sound from my lungs. I dared to step forward. The ground was soft, moss damp beneath my boots. I strained to listen, but there was nothing. No birds, no insects, no wind through the leaves. Even my own movement seemed muted. as though the world had gone deaf. The shape brushed past again, closer this time. I could feel its edges, cool, damp, like the fog itself, sliding along the curve of my shoulder. I spun, catching only empty mist, but the pressure lingered, tracing along my spine. A smell drifted, earth and decay, wet moss, and something faintly metallic. The fog carried it thickly, layered over my senses, and I realized I could trust nothing here except the thrum of my own heartbeat. I whispered my name. It seemed strange to hear it only inside my own mouth. The sound did not leave me, did not escape into the forest, and the darkness at the edges of vision shivered as if listening. I tried to move faster, step after cautious step, but each one sank softly into the fog, leaving no trace, erasing itself almost instantly. The silence became denser with every motion, as though the fog thickened to meet me. Then it brushed me again. A sudden cold, fingers of mist dragging along my sleeve, and I could feel its presence, but not see it. The isolation was sharp, cutting, and I knew the fog was not empty. I stopped. The world felt fragile, like a held breath. Even my panic had soundless weight. The dark shape lingered close, moving without footsteps, without disturbance in the mist. I could feel the fog coil around my legs, pressing, holding, and the pressure drew me forward. Not violently, no, too quiet for that, but as if the fog itself wanted me to move into its endless depth. I inhaled slowly. The mist entered my lungs, damp and cold. A memory of warmth, of another place, rose and fell away. The shape shifted, brushing past again, then retreated, its presence lingering like the shadow of sound. I kept walking, step by careful step. No echoes followed, no reassurance. Only the fog, dense, patient, and the faint suggestion of something just beyond reach watching, waiting. And I realized the forest had swallowed every sound but my own, and still it waited. The forest was quiet, though not empty. A thin mist curled along the roots, weaving through the trunks like slow, deliberate fingers. I stepped carefully, boots pressing soft impressions into the damp earth. The air smelled of wet bark, moss, and cold stone. At first, I thought it was the wind, the trees, shifting, but the rhythm was too steady. Inhale, exhale. The forest itself seemed to breathe around me. I reached out, brushing my fingers along a tree trunk. The bark pulsed beneath my touch, moving subtly, like skin beneath water. A shiver ran down my spine. I withdrew my hand, heart thudding. The trunk swayed without wind. Branches bent and straightened slowly, casting elongated shadows that seemed to stretch toward me with quiet intent. Each inhale drew me closer, each exhale pushed me back, and the rhythm pressed on my chest like a pulse. A rustling soft at first, then deliberate. I turned. Between two massive trees, a figure loomed, tall, still, watching, its edges blurred like fog, then disappeared into the trunks as though the trees had swallowed it whole. I moved closer. Each step was measured, cautious. The mist clung to my boots, cold and damp. The smell of wet bark intensified, almost metallic. Every tree I passed seemed to breathe louder, the skin-like bark wrinkling and stretching with each silent inhalation. I stopped. The forest waited with me. The figure was gone, but its presence lingered in the subtle shift of the trunks, in the shallow exhale of the earth. I could feel it watching still, even without sight. A soft footfall behind me. I froze. Only the pulse of the breathing trees responded. I whispered my own name. It returned as a faint echo, stretching along the trunks, almost alive. I touched another tree. It pressed back, solid, warm in an unnatural way. The rhythm quickened. Inhale, exhale, a cadence too deliberate to be wind. Branches brushed my cheek, leaves trembling with an unseen heartbeat. The fog shifted around the base of the trees. A shadow flickered there, low, moving. I stepped back. The ground felt unstable, damp, as though the forest were drawing me closer to its center, wrapping the trunks around me, pulling at my breath. I tried to run, but each step was slowed by the mist, thick and unyielding. The bark pulsed beneath my palms as I touched another trunk, the exhale pushing against me, as though the forest had its own lungs, and I was trapped within them. I stopped again. A shiver rose through me. The figure had returned, emerging from the weave of trunks and fog. It did not move toward me, but the gaze, if it could be called that, pierced the rhythm of the trees, and I felt every inhale and exhale echo against my chest. I whispered almost silently, and the forest replied. A subtle shift, a vibration in the roots, as though it listened. I could feel its patience, like a tide holding me between breaths. I turned, moving slowly away. The fog clung to me, cold and damp. The figure faded, blending with the pulsing trunks. Each tree seemed to watch me leave, expanding and contracting. A slow inhale, a deliberate exhale, and I understood at last that the forest itself was alive, and I had walked inside its lungs. I stepped out of the mist. The night was quieter now, though I could still feel the forest breathing behind me. Every rustle of leaves, every shifting shadow whispered of presence, and I carried its pulse with me, a rhythm I could not shake. The forest exhaled. I walked on. The night was cold, though the air held a damp sweetness. Moonlight spilled through bare branches, painting silver paths on the forest floor. The leaves whispered beneath my boots, soft and hesitant, like someone breathing just behind me. Shadows flickered across the undergrowth. At first I thought it was the wind, but they moved against it, drifting independently, sliding over roots and stones like liquid. Each shape reminded me of something familiar, a memory, a face, a laugh I could not place. I paused. A soft hum rose around me, almost imperceptible, as if the night itself were leaning in. The shadows multiplied, dozens now, slipping through trees, through fog, never still long enough to be caught. I heard voices, not loud, not words, more like fragments, whispers curling around the edges of my mind, choices, regrets, directions I had taken and had not. They beckoned me toward a winding path, narrow, twisted, hidden under the moonlight's silver gaze. I stepped forward. The fog thickened at my ankles, cold and wet. Each movement echoed softly, though the forest felt alive with quiet observation. Branches brushed my cheeks, leaves tickling like ghostly fingers. The whispers grew sharper, repeating thoughts I had never spoken aloud, pulling at me, urging me on. The shadows shifted again. One lingered longer than the others, hovering near a gnarled root, its edges blurred like smoke, its presence both familiar and wrong. I shivered. The night smelled of wet moss, of earth turned over, and beneath it, a faint metallic tang that made my mouth dry. I tried to resist the pull, but the voices threaded themselves into my steps, every choice I made mirrored by the whispers. The path twisted beneath the moon, turning into angles I could not have imagined, leading me deeper into the forest's soft, suffocating embrace. I stumbled over a root. Cold fog rose to meet my fingers. The shadows paused. The whispers became a low chorus, breathing around me in rhythm with my heartbeat. It was impossible to know if they were guiding me or trapping me. The moonlight shifted through the trees, pale and fractured. I glimpsed movement along the periphery, figures dissolving into mist as soon as I looked directly at them. Each step I took seemed mirrored by something unseen, a presence moving just out of reach, a rhythm of silence and shadow. I stopped again, chest tight. A voice, clearer now, echoed a regret I had not yet named. It wound through the branches, curling around my neck, pressing against my ears with a weight that was almost touch. The shadows leaned closer, pale edges flickering, and I felt a pulse, slow and deliberate, as if the forest itself were watching, deciding. I followed the path anyway. It wound over roots and under low-hanging limbs, each step accompanied by whispers and rustling fog. The moon caught on slick leaves, sending sparks of light across the forest floor. The air felt heavier here, damp with expectation, as though every choice I had made, every step I had taken, was held in the pause between whispers. Something moved just ahead, a shadow sliding between trees. I could not see its form, only the space it occupied, and a faint pressure tugging at the back of my mind. The whispers fell quiet for a moment, then returned, softer, coaxing me forward, turning curiosity into a subtle, gnawing dread. I reached a bend in the path. Moonlight pooled in the center, pale and still. The shadows had vanished, but the hush remained, pressing against my ears, filling the gaps between my breath and heartbeat. I realized the forest had led me here, and I was not alone, even in absence. The whispers lingered, brushing the edges of my thoughts. They reminded me of everything I had overlooked, every choice left unmade, every step I had not taken. I shivered, feeling the weight of unseen eyes in the silver glow of the moonlight. And then, slowly, I walked on. Each footfall stirred the fog, sending faint echoes into the night. And the forest breathed around me, a pulse of shadow and silence holding me in the long, quiet gaze of the moon. The fog pressed close tonight, damp and heavy. Moonlight cut thin lines through the trees, pale and cold. I could feel it in the air, the quiet hum of the forest, the rustle of leaves beneath my hesitant steps. I thought I had been alone. But the silence shifted. A presence moved with me. Every footfall I took, it mirrored. Soft. Exact. I stopped. The fog swirled around my ankles, thick and chilling. And then it stepped forward. A shape, dark and still, detached itself from the shadows. Tall, silent, indistinct in the mist. It moved like me. Every motion I made, it copied. I raised my hand, so did it. I turned my head, so did it. It did not speak. It did not breathe audibly, but I knew it was aware of me. The forest smelled of damp earth, of moss pressed under unseen weight. My chest tightened with the cold, the damp, the recognition. I had never seen its face. The fog hid it completely, yet I felt it. Its awareness, its attention, like eyes pressing into my mind without opening. I took a cautious step. The shadow stepped too, closer now, moving with the same rhythm, a dance of mirrored steps that made my pulse race. Leaves crackled under my boots, faint, brittle echoes that the fog swallowed almost immediately. I tried to speak. No words came. Only the whisper of breath shaking in my throat. I could sense its focus, the weight of it, like gravity bending toward me. The fog thickened. It twisted around my legs, rising like smoke from unseen fire. The shadow remained just beyond clarity, its outline blurred and fluid, but my skin felt the pressure of its nearness, the cold brushing at the nape of my neck, a presence folded into the silence. I moved again. It moved again. I turned sharply, the sound of snapping twigs loud in the quiet. The shadow followed without hesitation. It knew. It knew every shift, every instinct, every hesitation. A low, static hum seemed to pulse in the air. Or perhaps it was my own heartbeat, echoing too loudly, amplified by the fog, magnified by the awareness of the figure beside me. I could not see its face, could not know its shape, yet the recognition was unmistakable. A familiarity that should have been impossible, like it had always existed at the edge of my vision, waiting. I raised both hands slowly. It raised both hands slowly. I exhaled. It exhaled, or at least it moved as though it had. The fog swirled between us, a thick curtain of damp gray, holding the shape just out of focus, a mirror in the darkness. I wanted to run. The instinct burned in my chest, but every step forward felt measured by its shadow. Each movement mirrored so precisely that I became aware of the space it occupied, even without seeing it clearly. The forest breathed around me, leaves rustling in a wind I could not feel. Branches creaked under invisible weight, and still the shadow stayed. Silent, waiting, present. Time stretched. The fog shifted. I could see the faint trace of its form moving closer, but the face remained hidden, masked by mist and darkness, its intent unknowable, yet undeniable. I stopped completely. The shadow stopped completely. We hovered in the same moment, breathing in tandem with the forest, connected through movement, through space, through something I could not name. And then, without warning, a shiver of wind passed through the clearing. The shadow wavered. The fog shifted. And just like that, it receded, melting back into the forest, leaving only a memory of presence, a weight where none should exist. I exhaled slowly. The hum faded. The forest returned to its normal quiet, yet I could feel it still. The knowledge of it, the echo of its movement, the awareness that somewhere in the fog it remembered my name. The forest opened suddenly. A pale light spilled over the ground, soft and still. The trees arched back, leaving a space wide and quiet. The fog lingered at the edges, hesitant to enter. For a moment I thought I was safe. The hum of the forest softened. The air smelled of cold earth and frost-tipped grass. A gentle wind lifted my hair, brushing against my cheeks. The figure I had been following, it was gone. No rustle of movement, no shifting shadow, only the emptiness where it had hovered. I breathed slowly, listening for a hint of its return. Nothing came. The clearing seemed peaceful. I stepped forward, the soft ground muffling my footsteps. Light reflected on dew-damp leaves, and I felt briefly that I had emerged from a long night into morning. But the forest edges were close now, leaning in. Branches like fingers reached toward me, dark against the pale light. I felt the pull of the trees, their silence pressing inward, an awareness that they waited beyond the clearing. I turned slowly, half expecting the figure to reappear, but the clearing held only emptiness. Cold. A deep, hollow silence that wrapped around my chest, pushing against my heartbeat. The wind whispered through the branches, soft and sorrowful, carrying a smell of wet moss and old wood. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of being alone. No reflection in the puddles, no shadow beside me, only the fog at the edges, still and quiet. I walked slowly to the center, my boots pressing into soft, cold earth. The light above shifted, pale and steady. A leaf drifted down, brushing my hand, and I realized I had nowhere left to run. The forest had stopped moving. No birds called. No rustle of small creatures stirred the underbrush. Even the wind had paused, leaving only the rhythm of my breath. It was an emptiness that seemed to belong to the trees themselves, as though they had exhaled all presence from the clearing. I thought of the shadows, the shapes, the figures that had mimicked me, the whispering, the steps that were never my own, and now they were gone, vanished, leaving only the quiet truth of being utterly alone. I knelt on the soft earth. Cold seeped through my palms, anchoring me to this place. I could smell the damp wood, the frost lingering in the roots beneath me, and the faint scent of something lost, lingering in the fog. I listened to the silence. It was not threatening now. It was a presence of its own, not empty, but still like the breath of the forest itself had settled over me. A shiver ran down my spine, not from fear, from knowing that I had reached the edge of everything I had been chasing, that the shadows had led me here, and that there was nowhere left to go. I stood slowly, feeling the light against my face, the cold pressing gently on my back. The forest waited at the edges, patient, unmoving. I could feel its attention, curious, watching, yet no longer threatening. I took a deep breath, the air crisp and still in my lungs, and I accepted it. The clearing held me in its quiet. Alone, yes, but safe somehow, in the soft embrace of pale light and waiting trees. I let my eyes drift over the clearing one last time. No movement, no shadow, only the gentle sway of branches, the fog curling at the edges, and the sense of having arrived at the final pause of the forest's long, slow whisper. I stepped forward into the center, letting the light wash over me, letting the silence settle deep into my bones. The forest edges pressed close, but I did not turn away. I was here, and I was alone. For the first time, it felt like enough. The path curved again. Mist clung to my boots, curling around ankles, rising in pale threads that hid the earth beneath. Familiar trees appeared, their trunks worn, mossy, like old friends waiting. Leaves whispered overhead, stirring with the faintest breath of wind. Yet the air felt different, thicker, weighted with something I could not name. I walked slowly, each step careful, listening to the soft rustle beneath my feet. Shadows clung to the edges of the path, long and thin, shifting as if alive. One in particular lingered, at the edge of my vision, always just out of focus, watching. The fog thinned here and there, allowing glimpses of the familiar curves of branches, the way the sun, or perhaps moonlight, hit the bark. It should have been comforting. It was not. I stopped. The shadow paused, too. There was a patience in its presence, like it had been waiting for me all along. I could feel its awareness pressing gently, a subtle hum through the air, a static on my skin. The path wound back on itself, folding in ways I did not remember. I thought I knew this place, and yet it shifted with every breath I took. The smell of damp earth rose, mixed with the faint metallic tang of something unseen. I touched a tree trunk, cold, smooth, alive in a way that made my fingers tremble. The fog curled around my hand like a ribbon, coiling and retreating as though it were breathing. I stepped forward, and the shadow moved with me. Always there, not a reflection, not a mimic. Something older, something patient. I glimpsed shapes in the mist, branches bending strangely, leaves curling toward me in silent acknowledgement. A faint hum rose from the ground itself, as though the forest exhaled through roots and bark. I swallowed hard. This was home, and yet it was not. The trees I had recognized looked the same, and yet the space between them had changed. Distance stretched. The air tightened. I felt smaller, alone in a place I thought I knew. I stopped again, breath shallow, chest tight. The shadow lingered, a dark stain against the mist. I did not move. It did not move. The forest held its breath with me. I noticed the path behind me twisting strangely, as if the journey I had taken had been folded over itself. I realized then that some paths never truly end. They loop, coil, return you to beginnings you do not recognize. A breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of wet pine and damp stone. The shadow shivered with the wind, and I felt it more than saw it. A presence in the chest, a knowing that I was seen even as I stared at familiar trunks. I stepped forward slowly. Mist brushed my face, cool and soft. The shadow followed, patient, unbroken. The path stretched ahead, uncertain. The clearing I had hoped for did not appear. Only the same trees and the whispering fog between them. I lowered my gaze to the path. Leaves damp underfoot, twigs snapping softly. My breath mirrored the hum of the forest itself, rising and falling in rhythm with something older. I sensed the shape waiting, just beyond the thin veil of mist. It did not move toward me. It did not need to. Its awareness filled the space. I was never truly alone. The air shifted, cooling my neck, pressing lightly against my shoulders. I exhaled slowly, letting the realization settle. The journey had returned me home, but home had changed. The mist held memories, and the forest remembered each step I had taken. I walked on. The shadow followed, quiet, patient. Some paths, I understood, do not lead anywhere new. They simply bring you back to what you cannot leave. And I knew, as I breathed in the fog, that I was home in its way, yet never free from its watchful presence. The trees sighed, mist swirled, and I moved forward.